How's it going, everybody? Today, I just want to discuss with you a basic overview of week two's general readings and activities. So, some of the general themes revolved around proper nutrition as well as how to, I would say, prescribe nutrition to individuals in an attainable, in a basic way. So, one of the first articles we read was by Dr. White called Nutritional Goal Setting, and I used this in my meeting with my client this week. Some of the basics of it were to use small, measurable improvements to change diet, add and replace food options, and then avoid eliminating things. So, a good example would be writing down everything that you eat, and a bad example would be just following a fad diet that you recently found in a periodical. The second article I read was about the general recommendations from the World Health Organization. And in that article, it addressed some of the basic needs for a healthy adult as well as a child. And this revolved around a certain amount of your diet being towards fruits and vegetables so that you can meet the needs of adequate fiber. And you would include this in every meal, trying to provide variety in your diet, as well as limiting things like fat to less than 30%, added sugars to less than 50%, and then salt to less than 5 grams, excuse me. And these all had their added health benefits, as the article provided associations with certain diseases being decreased with limited intake in some of these nutrients. And the same went for kids. Mostly the only big difference it provided for kids was talking about healthy breastfeeding practices, so up to 6 months as their sole source of nutrition. And it actually recommended up to 2 years and beyond as a supplement, which I was not aware of. And I have 2 kids and a third on the way. So I'll be needing to talk to the wife about that one. Let's go into another article that was provided. We read an article by Hamblin called "New Nutrition Study Changes Nothing," and I'm going to move on to one of the last questions, which was, "Is the science of healthy eating confusing?" And the reason I want to move into this question before I address the others is because I think this article did a great job talking about our necessity for novelty. We like to see new things and we like to try them. We like things that are entertaining. We like things that pop out at us like news headlines. And it does a good job providing a few examples of how the media has structured their titles and their articles around literature. One of the main ones that it discussed, I think the most important one, was the Pure Study, where it was just observing different diet cultures and different healthy people around the world. And again, it addressed the same necessity or the same need as the WHO article, which was the healthiest people had diets full of fruits, beans, vegetables, whole grains, so high in carbs, but natural, right, and low in refined or added carbs, refined carbs and added sugars. And then it went on to provide a few other really interesting points that I wanted to touch on, like the New England Journal of Medicine had a study where they evaluated diabetics and they looked at lifestyle change through nutrition compared to metformin, a common drug, and how lifestyle change worked for a lot of individuals better than metformin. And then the last thing that it noted that I wanted to mention was that wealthy nations have greater access to adequate proteins and fats. And that's something I think we don't consider when we are talking about healthy diet and when we observe, and this article talks about this, when we observe other nations eating predominantly carbohydrate based on the access to the types of foods that they have. They don't necessarily have the direct access like we do to lots of really rich protein sources and lots of fat sources as well, even though it's supposed to be a limited part of the diet. So I think the science of healthy eating can be confusing, not only for educators, but also for consumers, because there's a lot of information being thrown at you. One of the great points that the article made was that there's not a lot of research controlled trials, and so the science is really left to, or the consumerism is really left to, not necessarily consumerism either, that's not right. Let's say the main sources of information are left to these cult-like nutrition plans. I don't want to mention anything, but there are quite a few diet books out there where individuals have realized a dietary change has worked well for them, and then they pitch it in a book and an eating plan and a lifestyle change, and they expect everybody else to adhere to that plan. And I agree with the article to a certain extent. That's not realistic for most people. And that's the last point that I want to make about why it's confusing, is that everybody has a completely different dietary pattern. Everybody has a completely different necessity. We can, for the most part, adhere to the guidelines, but everyone's probably going to have their little tweak based on their own individual physiology. So just to revert back to some of the other questions, the behavior change session that I had earlier this week, it went really well. It's actually a client that I'm already working for in changing his physical fitness behavior. So now we just added in a little nutritional aspect with some of these goals. And this is good because he had a chance to talk to me about what his nutritionist is recommending him. And we can, in some ways, modify the activity if we need to around his diet plan that she's given him. And then the mental aspect, the mental session is probably going to be a new one for him as well. So I'm enjoying it so far. I didn't know if I was going to. I thought it was going to be a tough one, but I think it's going to be a great activity that's going to give me a little bit of experience in counseling over the course of 8 weeks. Now the implications for my personal life, or more so for my professional work from this list of reading and these activities, I think are going to be major, because I'm a physical education teacher and I plan on staying in physical education for a while, even after I finish this degree. And so understanding some of the basic or some of the fundamental principles of nutrition, I'm going to be talking about those things every single day with individuals who don't really understand them. Individuals between the age of 13 and 19 who think that a bag of chips and a soda pop is okay for lunch. But realistically, it's not, as we saw from most of our readings this week. So it's going to be good for me to understand some of the basic things that I could teach them, as well as some of the easiest implementations or easiest practices for them to implement in terms of change to have a better diet or work towards a healthier eating pattern. And then the last question that I want to attack here is, what are some evidence-based interventions for improving our dietary choice? And I want to refer back to an article that we looked at last week, because these are the first things that popped in my head, but I didn't want to steal them. I want to give credit. We read an article last week called Encouraging Healthy Behavior, 8 Evidence-Based Strategies, and 2 of the strategies were based around unhealthy eating. One was called Small Changes, and one was called The Plate Method. And within this, it goes a little bit deeper into detail. So small changes would be, like we talked about at the beginning of this video, teaching those individuals to make smart, attainable goals, basic changes like adding a serving of fruit or vegetables per meal, or writing down everything that they're eating just so they can get a basic understanding of their own behavior and influences. And then the second one, the plate method, which the plate method encourages individuals to look at what they're providing in each meal and try to make 50% of that plate or half of that plate fruits and veggies, so some of those healthy sources of carbs that we talked about earlier on, 25% to lean proteins, and then that last quarter could be to grains and starches. So we really want to focus the majority of the plate on the fruits and vegetables and the lean meats. Well, I thank you all for listening, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week, and I look forward to seeing some of your videos and some of your summaries. Thank you and good night.